These stone walls function as a selective filter. They secure a specific quality of life within, while excluding the economic reality of the surrounding city. Yale University currently holds a $41.4 billion endowment. Because of its institutional status, this wealth is almost entirely exempt from local property taxes, even as the university sits at the center of a city struggling with deep structural poverty. Data from the Opportunity Atlas, a research project that uses census and tax records to track generational mobility, reveals the results of this proximity. On the left is the university's multi-billion-dollar footprint. On the right are neighborhoods like Dixwell and New Hallville, where children reach a median household income of $18,000 to $27,000 by age 35. In the 1950s and 60s, New Haven received more federal urban renewal funding per capita than any other American city. Officials marketed this as the model city. Standard political analysis often frames the current state of these neighborhoods as a failure of that policy. The assumption is that the federal investment simply didn't reach its intended target. However, the Model City project reached its actual objectives. It successfully organized the city into a simulation for testing theories of population management. The city operates through the logic of biopower, a form of governance that manages populations through the regulation of their spatial, medical, and biological lives. Biopower sorts a city into two distinct demographic categories. The first is cultivation. Inside the university walls, an elite population receives concentrated institutional investment designed to maximize their health, security, and future productivity. The second category is containment. The population in the surrounding neighborhoods is subjected to continuous surveillance and the systematic restriction of their movement and capital. Urban renewal provided the tools for this engineering. Planners demolished entire Black neighborhoods to build highway connectors and parking lots that functioned as buffer zones, physically separating the university from the city. Maintaining these extreme boundaries required an academic narrative to justify the mass displacement to the public. In 1940, Yale researcher Robert Austin Warner published New Haven Negroes. It became the primary sociological text for explaining the city's poverty. Analytical, this chart maps the structural policies occurring alongside Warner's research. In 1924, the university purchased dozens of properties along Dixwell Avenue, displacing the residents. By 1933, local banks had refused 94% of mortgage applications from Black neighborhoods. In 1937, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, a federal agency, officially marked these neighborhoods hazardous in red ink. This decision froze all conventional credit and prevented families from maintaining their homes. Warner's study erased these documented policies from the record. Instead of citing capital starvation or land grabs, he photographed the resulting decay and attributed it to the cultural pathology of the residents. He took the debris of specific political choices and rebranded it as a racial trait. Scholars call this process racecraft. It is the alchemy of taking visible social outcomes produced by policy and attributing them to the inherent failings of the people being targeted. This allowed the elite institution to study the very conditions it helped manufacture, positioning its researchers as objective observers rather than active participants. By turning political violence into a natural phenomenon, the university's epistemology ensured the architects of the system remained invisible. The origins of this narrative control reach back to 1790, at the very beginning of the New Haven colony. As Connecticut began the process of gradual abolition, local authorities sought new ways to maintain spatial and economic control over a population they could no longer legally own as chattel. David Daggett, a magistrate and future founder of Yale Law School, orchestrated the 1790 execution of a Black man named Joseph Mountain. To justify the spectacle, Daggett published a 19-page pamphlet detailing Mountain's alleged history of global crime. Daggett wrote the pamphlet in the first person, forcing the victim to testify against himself from the gallows. By fabricating this confession, the magistrate used his authority to script the victim's remorse and guilt for public consumption. The document circulated throughout the region, establishing the media template for the inherently dangerous Black criminal. This narrative justified the transition from physical enslavement to the legal subordination of the state. It provided the moral cover for new laws that criminalized Black movement and presence. The law proved that physical containment is impossible without a state-controlled narrative to justify it. This legal framework supported a massive, unprecedented economic shift during the critical abolition movement of the mid-19th century. Legal abolition enabled the wealth generated by 2 centuries of forced labor to move into new institutional hands. In 1860, the capital value of the enslaved population in the South was estimated at $3 billion. Upon emancipation, this value evaporated from Southern balance sheets, leaving the formerly enslaved with a net worth of 0. Simultaneously, the federal government issued 129 million acres of public land to private railroad corporations. This was a land transfer larger than the state of Texas. This photograph records the transition to a new system of industrial labor. The federal government redirected resources toward northern industrial networks while revoking the land titles previously promised to freedmen. These railroad land grants directly enriched the families associated with Yale's Russell Trust Association, or Skull and Bones. The same elite network that backed the moral cause of abolition also controlled the banks and corporations that capitalized on the post-war industrial expansion. This was the Great Inversion. It replaced chattel slavery with a new modality of labor control that eliminated the costs of ownership while maintaining total access to a resource-starved workforce. Marginalized populations responded to this exclusion by building their own networks of mutual aid and independence. In the 1820s, William Lanson, the elected black governor of New Haven, built a self-governed neighborhood called New Guinea. Lanson was a critical figure in the city's economy. His engineering firm extended the city's main wharf over 1,000 feet into deep water, creating the infrastructure necessary for New Haven to compete with New York as a commercial hub. Lanson's economic power was tolerated as long as his labor served white commercial interests. But in 1831, Lanson attempted to fund the nation's first college for black men in New Haven. Institutional retaliation was immediate. A town meeting of 700 white residents voted to block it. Within years, city officials used bureaucratic harassment and targeted arrests to bankrupt Lanson, who eventually died in an almshouse. Lanson's case shows that the system welcomes minority labor, but views independent intellectual and economic sovereignty as a threat to be dismantled. This cultural engineering continued for centuries. In 1915, the Yale Daily News praised the white supremacist film The Birth of a Nation as a wonderful epic, celebrating the exact racist mythology that justified the continued containment of black life. While the laws changed from black codes to urban renewal, the geographical borders of the city remained fixed. A crossfade of maps from 1790, 1937, and 2024 shows an identical geometry. The specific mechanisms of exclusion evolved, but the footprint of the containment zones never moved. Today, the modern police report functions with the same utility as Daggett's 1790 pamphlet. It acts as an official record produced by the institution exercising force, designed to authorize violence while erasing the voice of the person it targets. A model city functions as an architectural simulation where elites test theories of population management. The underlying map of power remains static, even as the residents change. In 1790, Joseph Mountain died at the hands of the state in New Haven. In 2000, 19-year-old Frederick R. James Jr. died in police custody in the same city. Both men died within the same footprint of institutional extraction. In both cases, the institutions responsible for their deaths controlled the resulting public record. We must look at the data of urban poverty and incarceration, not as evidence of a failing system, but as a record of institutional success. The data shows a system operating exactly as designed. Identifying the architecture of that design is the first step towards dismantling it.